Dexter Morgan didn't just outsmart James Doakes, he manipulated him. Doakes saw the truth before anyone else. He knew Dexter wasn't normal. He wasn't just a blood spatter analyst, he was a predator, and yet, somehow, Dexter flipped the script, making Doakes look like the threat. Step by step, he manipulated him into a trap he could never escape. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation should have exposed Dexter. Instead, it framed Doakes. How did Dexter pull it off? Stay tuned, because this is the ultimate mind game. From the moment James Doakes met Dexter, he knew something wasn't right. Maybe it was the way Dexter never flinched at crime scenes, like murder was just another routine. Maybe it was how he seemed almost too comfortable around blood, more fascinated than disturbed. Or maybe it was pure instinct. Doakes was trained to recognize killers, and something in Dexter set off alarms that no one else seemed to hear. Most of Miami Metro dismissed the idea. Dexter was the harmless, awkward blood spatter analyst, the guy who made bad jokes and focused a little too much on his work, but nothing more. To them, the idea that he could be dangerous was ridiculous. But Doakes didn't buy it. He saw the cracks in Dexter's mask, the moments where something darker slipped through. The problem? No one else did. Dexter knew Doakes was watching. He knew that, out of everyone in Miami Metro, Doakes was the only one who could ever expose him. But instead of hiding or avoiding him, Dexter took control. He didn't just stay out of trouble, he made Doakes the problem. That's how manipulation works. When someone gets too close, you don't just defend yourself, you turn the suspicion back on them. And that's exactly what Dexter did. It started small, subtle digs, playing the innocent, confused act whenever Doakes got aggressive, making sure their confrontations always happened in public, where Dexter could be the quiet, composed one while Doakes lost his temper. It didn't take much. Doakes was already known for being intense, blunt, and unwilling to back down. Dexter just needed to push him a little further, and it worked. Instead of people questioning Dexter, they started questioning Doakes. Why was he so obsessed with a blood analyst? Why did he keep going after a guy who had never done anything wrong? Was this personal? Did Doakes have some kind of grudge? The suspicion that should have fallen on Dexter started sticking to Doakes instead. Every time Doakes tried to press harder, he only made himself look worse. Every accusation, every angry confrontation made him seem more unstable. And Dexter? He just kept playing along, because as long as Doakes looked like the aggressor, no one would ever believe he was right. The suspicion that should have fallen on Dexter started sticking to Doakes instead. Every time Doakes tried to press harder, he only made himself look worse. Every accusation, every angry confrontation made him seem more unstable. And Dexter? He just kept playing along, because as long as Doakes looked like the aggressor, no one would ever believe he was right. The more Doakes pushed, the more Dexter let him unravel. It wasn't just about playing innocent. It was about making Doakes question his own instincts. Dexter understood that manipulation wasn't just about deception, it was about control. And what better way to control someone than to make them doubt the very thing that defines them? Doakes prided himself on his gut instincts. He had spent years in the military, years in law enforcement, and had built a career on being able to read people accurately. But no matter how sharp his intuition was, it wasn't enough against someone like Dexter. Someone who didn't just deceive, but manipulated reality itself. When Doakes caught Dexter snooping around a crime scene at night, it should have been a huge red flag. A normal forensic analyst had zero business being there. But Dexter didn't panic. He didn't run. He stood his ground and made Doakes feel like the one who was in the wrong. And that's where Dexter's psychological warfare became truly dangerous. By keeping his responses casual, unemotional, and dismissive, Dexter made it seem like Doakes was overreacting. He didn't try to prove his innocence. He made Doakes prove his guilt. And without solid evidence, Doakes had nothing but his instincts. And instincts? They don't hold up in court. The moment Doakes started following Dexter after hours, it was already too late. The seeds had been planted. Every officer at Miami Metro had heard about Doakes' obsession with Dexter. Every eye roll, every sarcastic remark, every moment where Dexter played dumb had built up to one inevitable conclusion. Doakes had it out for Dexter, and that's where Dexter's manipulation reached another level. He didn't need to silence Doakes. He just needed to make sure no one believed him. This is the ultimate power move. When someone is telling the truth, but the world sees them as irrational, they become powerless. And Doakes? He was now trapped in a cycle of his own righteous frustration. Every time he lashed out, it only reinforced the lie. Dexter had won the first battle, but Doakes wasn't done yet, and Dexter knew it, which meant it was time to push him even further. If there's one thing Dexter understood better than anyone, it was how to control a narrative. He didn't just manipulate individuals, he manipulated perception itself. And when the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation took off, Dexter saw the perfect opportunity. This wasn't just about outsmarting Doakes anymore. This was about eliminating him entirely, without ever laying a hand on him. The plan was meticulous. He didn't need to silence Doakes, he just needed to redirect suspicion, And step 1, make Doakes look like a criminal. It was almost poetic. Doakes had spent years trying to prove that Dexter was dangerous, that there was something lurking beneath his mask. But by the time Dexter had him trapped, that truth was completely flipped. Now it was Doakes who looked like the monster. When Doakes followed Dexter to a remote location, it should have been the moment he finally won. He had been right all along. Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher. But here's where Dexter's manipulation mastery kicked in. He had already anticipated this. He turned the tables in seconds. Doakes went from hunter to prisoner in an instant, knocked out, locked in a cage, and, most importantly, surrounded by just enough evidence to frame him for everything. The blood slides, the crime scene photos, even Dexter's own research, it was all there. And when the FBI found it, there wouldn't be a doubt in anyone's mind. Think about how brutal that is. Doakes was the only person who saw Dexter for what he truly was. He was the only one who stood a chance at stopping him. And now, the entire world saw him as a serial killer. His career, his reputation, his entire existence, all of it reduced to a single, inescapable lie. And here's the darkest part of all. Dexter didn't even have to kill him. That's the ultimate stage of manipulation, not just defeating your enemy, but making sure they can never fight back. Doakes was completely powerless, sitting in that cage, watching his life crumble while Dexter walked free. But even with all of Dexter's planning, there was still one wild card, one person who would change everything. Dexter didn't kill Doakes. He didn't have to. Someone else did it for him, someone reckless, unpredictable, and dangerously obsessed. And that's where this story takes an even darker turn. Doakes had lost almost everything. His job, his freedom, his reputation. But there was still a chance, however slim, that he could escape. If he made it back to Miami Metro, if he found just one person willing to question the official story, there was a possibility that the truth could come out. But Dexter had always been 3 steps ahead, and this time was no different. Because Doakes wasn't just locked away, he was a ticking time bomb, and Dexter knew that as long as he was alive, there was still a risk. That's why Lila was the perfect variable in his plan, because unlike Dexter, she didn't need a reason to kill. She acted on pure impulse, completely untethered by logic, guilt, or hesitation. And when she found Doakes, she did exactly what Dexter needed her to do but couldn't risk doing himself. She made sure he never left that cabin. The explosion was quick, brutal, and final. It didn't just kill Doakes, it erased him. There would be no final confrontation, no desperate attempt to prove his innocence, no last-minute twist where he exposed Dexter. There would be only flames, destruction, and silence. In a single moment, any remaining loose ends were burned away. And just like that, Dexter walked away not only undetected, but completely untouchable. James Doakes, the only man who ever truly saw through him, was gone, and the world accepted the lie that he was the Bay Harbor Butcher. The case was closed, the FBI stopped digging, and Miami Metro moved on. But here's the question. Was it all just convenient timing? Or was it something far more calculated? Did Dexter genuinely not see this coming? Or did he deliberately let Lila spiral out of control, knowing that her chaos would eventually work in his favor? Because if he did, if every step of this was planned, then this wasn't just Dexter outsmarting Doakes. It was Dexter orchestrating his most flawless manipulation yet. James Doakes, the only man who ever truly saw Dexter for what he was gone, and the world accepted the lie that he was the Bay Harbor Butcher. The case was closed, the FBI stopped digging, and Miami Metro moved on. But was it really just luck, or did Dexter plan every step of this downfall? Was Doakes doomed from the start, or could he have escaped if just one thing had gone differently? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you've made it this far, congrats! You clearly have a dark passenger of your own, always craving the next deep dive into Dexter's mind. So why not make it official? Subscribe and join the dark side. No code required. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.